Have you ever wanted the ground to swallow you whole due to a friend's spectacular screw-up? I think my best friend owes me a new career, maybe a new life. I need to tell this story because I am still reeling from the embarrassment. I should have known better than to involve him in anything important. He is not exactly known for his maturity. I still do not understand what he was thinking, but he ruined my chances. Now I have to figure out how to recover from this disaster. I am angry, but mostly I am just disappointed in myself for trusting him. The presentation was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I spent the whole weekend before going over my notes and practicing in front of a mirror. I felt confident and ready. I met my friend for coffee beforehand, and he seemed just as excited as I was. We went to the building together, and he sat in the front row. The presentation began, and everything seemed to be going well. I noticed my friend was acting a little strange, but I ignored it at first. Then things went downhill fast. I work at a pretty big company. I had been working toward this big presentation for months. It was a chance to pitch my project to the higher-ups, the kind of presentation that could make or break a career. I had been prepping for weeks, practicing my slides, and perfecting my delivery. I even bought a new suit for the occasion. I asked my best friend to come along for moral support. He is usually pretty reliable, so I thought it would be a good idea to have him there. Big mistake. The presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. I told my friend to meet me in the lobby at 9:30 so we could grab coffee and run through my notes one last time. He strolled in at 9:45, looking flustered and holding a large coffee cup. He mumbled something about traffic and not finding parking. I was already stressed, but I tried to stay calm. We walked quickly to the conference room. I felt the caffeine kick in. I hoped it would help me focus and not make me jittery. My friend launched into a story about his chaotic morning. He described a near accident on the highway and a parking garage ticket machine that wouldn't work. I nodded and made sympathetic noises. I tried to steer the conversation back to my presentation. I asked him to quiz me on the key data points, but he was still rambling about the parking situation. I managed to interrupt him and force him to focus for a few minutes. I reviewed the first few slides. I felt relatively prepared. I took another sip of the sugary coffee. My stomach started to feel a little queasy. I ignored it and focused on breathing. I wanted to be confident. I wanted to deliver a clear and persuasive presentation. My friend kept making small talk. It was distracting. I wished he would just be quiet. I needed to concentrate. I reminded myself to be grateful for his support. He was trying to be helpful, even if he was not succeeding. I told myself I would buy my own coffee next time. We headed to the coffee machine, and he insisted on getting me a coffee, which was nice of him, but in hindsight, I should have just said no. He came back with my drink. He handed it to me, beaming. I took a sip. It was way too sweet. I grimaced. He asked if it was okay. I said it was fine, not wanting to hurt his feelings before my big presentation. We found a quiet corner to review my notes. I was explaining the key points of my project when disaster struck. My friend, while gesturing emphatically about some point I honestly cannot recall, somehow managed to knock my coffee out of my hand. It flew through the air in slow motion. It felt like the coffee landed squarely on my boss. My boss, a woman known for her impeccable style and icy demeanor, was now covered in hot, sugary coffee. I watched in horror as the brown liquid spread across her white blouse. She gasped, and then her face turned an alarming shade of red. My friend stood there, frozen, his eyes wide with panic. I scrambled to grab napkins, but the damage was done. My boss, struggling to maintain her composure, excused herself to go clean up. I felt a surge of anger, directed at my friend and at the situation. This was a disaster. This presentation was important for a possible promotion I had been working towards. I knew I needed to act fast to salvage the situation, but my mind raced, unable to focus on a solution. I took a deep breath and told my friend to go get some club soda. I had heard that would help remove coffee stains. He scurried off, looking relieved to have a task. I went into the restroom, hoping there was some way to minimize the damage before my boss returned. I wet a paper towel and dabbed at the stain, but it only seemed to spread. The dark coffee color was still very obvious. The club soda trick hadn't worked either. My friend returned with it, but it didn't seem to do much. I considered asking someone if they had an extra blazer I could borrow, but I didn't know anyone else's sizes. I began to wonder if there was even any point in going through with the presentation. My boss came back, looking slightly less stressed. The presentation was supposed to start in 15 minutes. I felt my heart sink. I looked at my suit, now sporting a large coffee stain on the front. I looked at my friend, who was now stuttering apologies. I could not believe this was happening. I tried to salvage the situation. I found some stain remover in the office supply closet and attempted to clean my suit, but it only made things worse. The stain was still visible, and now I smelled like chemicals. I considered just leaving and going home. I decided that would be a terrible idea. Instead, I went back to my desk and tried to act like nothing happened. I busied myself with paperwork. I hoped my boss would forget about the whole thing, but that was unlikely. I heard her heels clicking down the hall. I braced myself for the worst. She stopped at my desk. I avoided eye contact. I waited for her to say something. My boss returned, looking slightly less furious but still clearly annoyed. She had changed into a spare blazer, which did not quite match the rest of her outfit. I knew this was not going to go well. We went into the conference room, and I tried to start the presentation. I was flustered, my notes were crumpled, and I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on my coffee-stained suit. My boss sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. I knew I was bombing. I could not focus. The projector bulb seemed way too bright. My hands felt clammy as I advanced to the second slide, which had a graph I barely understood. I had spent weeks preparing this presentation, but now all the information seemed to have evaporated from my brain. I was sweating. I needed to get through this. My career depended on it. The room felt like it was shrinking. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I tried to make eye contact with someone, anyone, for a sign of encouragement, but everyone seemed to be avoiding my gaze. This was a disaster. I wanted to disappear. I just needed to finish. I stumbled through the first few slides, my voice shaking. I kept losing my train of thought. I could feel my friend staring at me, his face a mixture of guilt and terror. Halfway through the presentation, my boss stopped me. She said she appreciated the effort, but suggested we reschedule for another day when I was better prepared. I knew what she really meant was when I was not a walking disaster. I mumbled an apology and quickly shut down my laptop. I did not make eye contact with anyone in the room as I unplugged the cords. My hands fumbled with the power adapter, and I almost dropped it on the floor. I managed to grab it before it fell, but the small mishap only amplified my humiliation. I felt a flush creep up my neck as I stuffed the device into my bag. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. The walk back to my desk felt like an eternity. Every step echoed in the sudden silence. I imagined that everyone was watching me, their eyes filled with pity or amusement. I avoided looking at anyone directly, focusing instead on the worn carpet. When I finally reached my cubicle, I slumped into my chair. I hoped I could just hide there for the rest of the afternoon. I nodded, defeated, and gathered my things. As I walked out of the conference room, I could hear the murmurs of my colleagues. I wanted to disappear. My friend followed me out, still apologizing profusely. I snapped. I told him he had ruined everything. I said I did not want to see him for a while. He looked crestfallen, but I was too angry to care. I slammed the door to my apartment. I paced back and forth, replaying the evening in my head. I could not believe how badly it had gone. My anger slowly shifted to anxiety. I knew my outburst was unprofessional. I worried about the consequences at work. I feared I had damaged relationships beyond repair. I spent a sleepless night tossing and turning. I dreaded facing everyone in the morning. I arrived at the office feeling sick. The air felt thick with tension. I went straight to my desk and tried to focus on my work. I needed to prove I could still perform. I avoided any unnecessary interactions. I hoped the situation would diffuse. I knew I needed to apologize to my boss. I just did not know what to say. I was worried about making things worse. The next few days were rough. My boss was distant and cold. My colleagues avoided eye contact. I felt like a pariah. I knew my career was not over, but it had definitely taken a major hit. I replayed the incident in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. Should I have just told my friend not to come? Should I have gotten my own coffee? Should I have worn a different suit? The answer to all of these questions is yes. I felt frustrated. I wanted to understand why this happened to me. I went over every detail repeatedly. I was sure I had prepared properly. I reviewed my notes and practiced my speech several times. The presentation should have gone smoothly. Instead, it was a complete disaster. My friend showed up late and disrupted everything. I felt angry at him and at myself. I knew I needed to fix this situation. I spent the next few days working non-stop. I revised my proposal and gathered new data. I wanted to make sure I addressed all the concerns from the previous presentation. I practiced my delivery until I felt confident. I eliminated all potential distractions. I triple-checked every slide for errors. I stayed late at the office and skipped meals. I focused all my energy on getting this right. I wanted to prove that I could handle this project. I had to succeed. A week later, I got called into my boss's office. I thought I was going to get fired. Instead, she offered me a chance to redeem myself. She said she recognized the potential in my project, despite the disastrous presentation. She gave me a new deadline and told me to come back with a revised proposal. I was relieved, but I also knew I had a lot of work to do. I spent the next few weeks working tirelessly, refining my presentation and making sure every detail was perfect. I also began looking at my previous presentation to see where I went wrong. I realized I had not emphasized the key points enough. I also needed to anticipate possible questions from the board members. I spent hours researching their backgrounds and their known interests. I contacted a former colleague who had worked with them before and asked for advice. He gave me some helpful tips on how to tailor my presentation to their specific concerns. I revised my slides to incorporate this feedback and practiced answering potential questions. I felt more prepared than I had before, but I was still anxious. I tried to focus on what I could control. I got plenty of sleep the night before. I ate a healthy breakfast and avoided caffeine. I reviewed my notes one last time on the way to the office. When I arrived, I took a few deep breaths and tried to clear my head. I reminded myself that I had done all that I could to prepare. I was ready to give the best presentation possible. I walked into the boardroom with my head held high. When the day came for the rescheduled presentation, I was a nervous wreck. I did not invite my friend. I made sure to double-check my suit for any stains. I practiced my delivery until I could recite it in my sleep. The presentation went well. I was confident, articulate, and prepared. My boss seemed impressed. Afterward, she told me she was pleased with my progress and that she was looking forward to seeing the project come to fruition. I felt relieved the presentation was over. I went back to my desk and started working on other tasks. I still had a lot of work to do on the project. I planned to stay late and get as much done as possible. I wanted to make sure I did not make any more mistakes. My boss's positive feedback motivated me to work even harder. I needed to show her I deserved this opportunity. That evening, I went over every detail of the presentation in my head. I thought about the questions I answered and how I could have answered them better. I re-examined the slides, looking for any errors or inconsistencies. I realized I was fortunate that things had gone as well as they did. The minor issues I had encountered could have been much worse. I decided that in the future, I would double-check all my work and rehearse my presentations more thoroughly. I had salvaged my career, but the experience left a mark. I learned a valuable lesson about the importance of preparation and the potential for even the smallest mishap to derail your plans. I also learned that maybe, just maybe, I should limit my coffee intake before important meetings. As for my friend, we eventually made up. He felt terrible about what had happened. He offered to pay for my dry cleaning and bought me a gift certificate to my favorite restaurant. I accepted his apology, but I also made it clear that he was never allowed to bring me coffee again. The gift certificate was nice, and I did enjoy the dinner. It did not erase the memory of the sticky, hot coffee soaking into my new suit. Every time I wore that suit afterwards, I thought about it. I could still smell the faint aroma of hazelnut even after the dry cleaning. I had flashbacks whenever someone mentioned coffee near me. I started associating coffee with betrayal and professional failure. It sounds dramatic, but it's true. I know it was just coffee, but the experience changed me. I am overly careful about beverages in general now. I test the lids on cups to make sure they are secure. I watch people walk with drinks, anticipating spills. People tell me I am being paranoid. I cannot help it. A coffee-related disaster will never happen to me again. I still cringe when I think about the coffee incident. It was the most embarrassing moment of my professional life. But it also taught me resilience and the importance of not letting a single mistake define my career. And maybe, just maybe, it made me a little bit more cautious about who I trust with my caffeine intake. I still have nightmares to this day about coffee spills, and now I always get my own coffee. I have become a coffee extremist, always checking on the barista, and micromanaging the process. I think I have a problem, but I will never trust anyone with my coffee ever again. The sound of liquid sloshing, even water, puts me on edge.